Okay. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the January 31st Equity Subcommittee meeting. Yes, Wednesday, January 31st Equity Subcommittee meeting. And I welcome everybody in joining tonight and looking forward to a presentation about updates with regard to what's going on in our district and in our schools and our community. So with that, I will hand it over to Ms. Shawana James Coles for her presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again, as Ms. Rubin has said, and we're really excited about tonight's presentation. And at the end, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions about the presentation. So we'll try to get through the presentation. There will be portions that we'll pause and have some dialogue together. And then at the end, as I said, we'll have another opportunity to ask questions about the presentations. So next slide, please.
I'm not on at my face. I don't think I am.
And then if you can mute your mics, that'll be great. So this is our agenda. Today, we'll talk a little bit about this idea of a beloved community. I'll share some equity highlights, and then Dr. Yanni and Dr. McGloin will share some DEIB and LMSD highlights. Ms. Buckman and I will talk about some upcoming events, and then we'll try to end by 8 o'clock and with an opportunity to ask questions. Waiting for you got it, Alexis? Oh, there we go. Our purpose, again, and this is a standing slide of just understanding our community voice, student voice, teacher voice, and we're always excited when we have our faculty in our community in these calls, because it provides an opportunity for us to all share and understand the perspectives of each group and to work together for a shared vision, which is our students, and to disrupt negativity bias. Knowing that there's a diversity of thought and we come from things with different angles, but that we can all work together so that we can have a great impact on our students and the broader community. And our goal is to create a positive change and improve the lives of our students. And together we can do this and ensure that we are addressing concerns and needs in our school community. And so the first opportunity you'll get is to answer this question about a beloved community. And you can come off of mute or you can put it in the chat. And it's this idea of, what do you think is the meaning of the phrase beloved community? And so this is a question for the community for you to share. What do you, when you hear this word, nope, go back, yep. What, when you hear this word, this phrase, beloved community, go back. What does it mean to you? Does anyone want to share? And this is meant to be interactive. Any hands up? No one wants to share? Absolutely not the LMSD community. Okay.
I'll share.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
I think it's a feeling of belonging in a community, that you are not just a stranger, but that it's a wonderful feeling to be able to walk down the street, or to go to Trader Joe's, or to go to the gym and see the people that live in your township and your community, and that you know them on so many different levels. Not just the board meeting and not just the church or synagogue, but every day you see them and you recognize them and they recognize you, and there's a little chat going on, and it's a communal caring for the township.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. I'll tell you, as someone who doesn't reside in the community, when I think of Lower Merion, I think of it as a beloved community because of all of the things that you just shared, that caring, I see Annie Lou Brown put in caring, Michelle Vessel put in taking pride in community, being friendly and helpful. Those are some of the things that I get to see sometimes when I'm going. So I never had gone to a Trader Joe's or to the farmer's market until I moved here. And now one of my favorite places is the Bruno counter when I go there and I talk about, you know, what I do in the district, or if there's an activity or something that I'm prepared, that I'm attending in the community. It's been just really wonderful to see this community. It's not a community that I wasn't familiar, and I think sometimes when you live in the community, you get to see those things, but you never hear what an outsider says about your community. So thank you for coming off mute and sharing those things. I think that, Dr. Yanni says, I think that it means everyone is valuing everyone else. We bring different backgrounds and perspectives to LMSD. So thank you for sharing. So the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, Candace, go ahead. I didn't see you.
No, because I know that there's also a quote and speech by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., since we're on the heels of Black History Month, where he referenced beloved community being about justice and equal opportunity for all human beings. And so I just wanted to note the great Dr. King.
Thank you. And you're ahead of me.
I'm sorry. I'm so
The
sorry.
next slide. So the reason I wanted to start off our talk with the beloved community is because Ms. Buckman and I had attended on the snow day, Ms. Buckman and I had attended a conference at Inspire, I think it was like a workshop. And they talked about this idea of a beloved community. And it really sat with me, and it really made me really think about Lower Merion and the opportunities that are available in this district. And a lot of times people think of all just because of the resources, but to me, it was about the people that I get to see, or the people that you represent and the families that are represented. That is that idea of a beloved community. So Dr. King did popularize this phrase of a beloved community to represent his vision for societies that embrace cooperation, unity, and justice and connection. And that's the piece. Sometimes when we're sitting at the table and we are hearing each other's stories, we have an opportunity to find those connections in the stories of people in our community. And maybe we didn't walk the same walk, but when you sit and you hear their stories, you're like, oh, that's connected to me in some way. It may not have been the same, but it resonates with me. And so this is this idea of community. So he did use this extensively in his speeches and his writing. He envisioned this beloved community that was rooted in a commitment to justice, equality, nonviolence, social change. And he envisioned a society where everyone worked together, regardless of their race, their color, their background, and that we would be treating each other with dignity and respect. And so that's what I think of when I think about the Lower Merion School District community. And we may not be where we want to be yet, but we're on the right path to being that beloved community. And so I wanted to share that, and I'm going to share a few tenets of this concept as we continue to move along. So the next slide, Alexis, please. So the key concepts are inclusion, which we've talked a lot about in Lower Merion, community building, and brotherhood and sisterhood. And sometimes if we just think about it from the lens of our students, and your children, the children that are in your communities, this idea of community, or if you're seeing children that's riding their bikes or playing in the playing or going to events and activities, there's some community building that's here in Lower Merion that I've had the privilege of seeing. So next slide, please. So his vision included an inclusive community that embraced diversity and helped emphasize the importance of unity among different racial and ethnic groups. And so I want to give you an opportunity to see if you've seen any places where you've seen an inclusive community in Lower Merion. So I'll let you come off of mute again if you would like to share some ideas or things where you've seen Lower Merion come together with inclusivity. And I see someone raise their hands. Can we hear? Did I lose it?
You went.
Oh, there you go.
No,
Yes, I'm sorry.
I,
I
I
couldn't
wasn't
see
sure
your face,
if
sorry.
I can't see everybody, so I
I
wasn't
couldn't
sure
either.
if
That's why I saw the hand raised. I'm sorry.
sorry. I'll lower my hand now. I don't know. I grew up in Ardmore until I was in 8th grade. And then we moved away. But I will say, I think what my parents would say about the inclusive community in Ardmore was that we could walk down the street, and if we were being good or not being good, a community member always acted like an extended member of our family. So you were definitely called to it if you weren't like on task, and you were also like, hey, Curry, what are you doing? Like, and they would check you. So there's something about an inclusive community that feels like an extension of family, an extension of support structures for each other. So everybody is valued, but at the same time, everybody is helping each other out and building each other up together.
Yeah, perfect. And then I see Michelle added the cultural heritage nights. And it's this opportunity again to get to know each other, to know that you had someone that had your back. It's that village mentality that it takes this village to raise a child and to be a part of. And I know you're probably like, why are we talking about this? But I felt like it's January. We've had a lot going on. This will be a nice time for us just to say what makes Lower Merion the place where I want to put my roots down, that I want to raise my family, that I want to be a part of conversations. And so that's why I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this morning. And so the next one, Alexis, please. The other idea is this idea of community building. The beloved community was not just this abstract concept that was out there, but that we're actively building communities that reflect our values. And so is there anything that you can see in this beloved LMSD community that reflects the values of when you grew up, or, maybe you didn't grow up in Lower Merion, and I'll make an example of what Carrie just shared. In the community that I grew up in Philadelphia, it was that same thing that on my block on Dover Street that I grew up on, that if someone saw me doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing, not only were they going to tell my mother, they were going to tell my grandmother, they were going to tell my aunts, and like, so everyone knew. So this was this idea of community. And we don't always get to do those things now. So I've been proud when I think about my childhood. We didn't have a lot of resources, but we had a very strong community. So I welcome any other suggestion, any other comments. The Girl Scouts, thank you. Anyone else want to share before we go to the next one? Okay. And then next slide, please, Alexis. Oh, the food bank, thank you. How awesome is that? Just making sure that people have the resources that they need. So Dr. King also talked about this brotherhood and sisterhood, and that transcends ethnic divisions. He envisioned a society where people worked together and they supported one another and they saw each other as members of the same human family. And I remember when I first came here, Jill, I don't know if Jill's on here, and I was trying to do so many things, Jill, and she said, you have to rely on your sisters. And she was talking about Megan and Kimberly and Alexis, and she was like, let your sisters help you with some of these things that you may not know. So it's this idea that as a community, we're all members of the same human family, and it transcends ethnic and racial and some even religious or cultural, that we are all in this together. And that's when you think about a community, we're all in this together. And I will give the group an opportunity to share out. Again, is there anything that you see in this brotherhood and sisterhood that you want to talk about with regard to the LMSD community? Ms. Jenkins? You're on mute.
Okay, I'm not muted anymore. In my close neighborhood, right around the high school, we have a email that goes around in our neighborhood, which allows us to help people that need help. If you need a ride somewhere, if you need the snow shovels, one of my neighbors just had twin boys, and we put together a meal plan so everybody has a week that they're doing meals for them. And I think something like that also gives rise to that old-fashioned neighborhood where the kids are playing on the block and in the street, and you know them all, and they all know you, and they know your dog, and and it's I think, again, it is all of the work that we have done to work with the high school, because it is part of our neighborhood, has been very rewarding and successful, I think, on many levels. And that all comes from the neighborhood supporting it. Also, the food bank, as somebody mentioned, as you know, that I'm part of the Ardmore Food Bank, and the need to take care of your neighbors when they have less than you, I think is really an important part of the brotherhood and sisterhood, which transcends racial lines. And it's basically an economic situation that we have to pay attention to.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's wonderful. And Alice, would you like to share a little bit about Best Buddies? Share.
You're gonna put me on the spot.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I like the Best Buddy, where it's the program where they put a so every student that with a need is paired up with another student, and they get to do fun things together. It's pretty much, that's what it is being buddies and having a good time at the same time.
Yeah. And I thank you for sharing that. In my previous school district, you know how the students go on their senior prom and they'll have like a cord, and it was so wonderful. A parent had shared how her student was a student that was receiving special education services, and how the girls, when they went prom dress shopping and all those things, made her daughter feel like she was so much a part of who they were. And it was just an amazing thing. So seeing students who are participating in Best Buddy programs, and it's rewarding on both ends. So that's why I wanted you to share that. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And then Alexis, the last slide for me, well, for this part. Again, I wanted to just again take this time to reiterate that for me, LMSD is a beloved community, and it is a powerful and his vision for this was powerful and both powerful and transformative, and it's this vision of this compassionate society. And our beloved LMSD community will continue to reflect the experience and stories of its members, and to identify those things that where we connect as we forge ahead as one school district. I love we're 11 schools, but we are one district. And so today, Dr. Yanni shared a little bit of this at a presentation and everyone loved this idea that we are one. And so I thank you for letting me share a little bit on this beloved community. And I thank you for the compassion that you show to us as we are making decisions. And sometimes everyone doesn't agree with the decisions we may make. We are a work in progress, but I do appreciate that together we can move ahead and forge ahead, and we will be a very powerful and continue to be a transformative district that everyone loves and appreciates. So thank you for that portion. And the next one, I also wanted to just take a couple slides to just share some highlights, because everyone doesn't get to see some of the things that go on in our district. And these are some highlights from our Mosaic meeting. We met at the Francis McGuire Art Museum on St. Joe's campus. And this is our Staff of Color Affinity group, but everyone is welcome to attend. And I specifically wanted to highlight a couple pictures of some of our support staff, because sometimes you don't get to see or interact with everyone. And so there's some pictures of our new registrar. There's some new pictures of our HR, some members of our HR team, Latoya, which everyone knows, because if you call myself or Megan, you typically will get Latoya first. But it was just such a wonderful time for the staff who may work in various buildings. When we first started, a staff member shared, "Oh, I didn't see you since we had the last meet and greet," and just was enthusiastic because sometimes you're working in silos and you're alone. But I really wanted to highlight the picture of the gentleman with the Phillies cap on. He is one of our late bus drivers, and the meet and greet was over at 4:45. And so on his runs, of course, he'll get to interact with other bus drivers, but he never gets to see staff from in the buildings because he's too busy. He's busy taking care of our precious cargo, getting them to and from. But when I tell you this smile that he has on his face, he was so elated to come to this event, to meet people, and he just talked about it and couldn't wait again till we have it again. We had to say to him, like, the museum is closing, and they just opened up for us because he was that excited to be a part of this meet and greet. And we had our HR team, because we've been doing a great job with recruitment, but we also want to make sure that we're retaining staff as we're bringing them in. And so they were there to address any questions or concerns that one may have. And Dr. Yanni did a powerful opening message to the group. Excuse me, the next slide, Alexis. This is some pictures from around the district. This kindergarten, I had to put the AM and PM because they did a people unit, and family members were able to come into this kindergarten classroom and share artifacts of their heritage and where they come from. And the children were so excited. And the next day they had a tea where they invited grandparents or their special person to come into the classroom and have tea. And they had a passport of all the places that different family members that come in and discuss their backgrounds. And again, like I said, sharing of artifacts. It was just such a powerful day with the students. Some of our elementary schools, I believe all of them have school families. And so you'll see those two pictures where Mrs. Kleiber is with her school family, and it's just so amazing to see the children walking through the building and going in and out of the different classrooms with different members, other grades, levels of students, and being a part of their school family and talking about what's going on in their lives and in the building. And then the bottom first three is Amy, Ms. Buckman and I had an opportunity to present at a conference for the Pennsylvania Department of Education on our building belonging work. And you'll see our previous superintendent, Dr. Mumeen, who is our current Secretary of Education. And then at BlackRock, they started a peer mediation program. And we're just so excited. And that was their first meeting where the students are receiving training on how to mitigate and support each other when problems may arise. So that was their inaugural meet and greet. And the teacher, Ashley, who's in charge, she had gifts for them, and they had notebooks to take their notes as they were going through their training. So that was a wonderful experience. Next, please. If you are a member of the Kittenwood family, this is one of our administrative assistants. I did not know this, but on Tuesdays, they have Tuesdays where the faculty wears, as a way of community building, they wear tutus around the building from the principal across the building. They have a big bag if you forget. So I wanted to highlight our support staff there. And then in the middle two photos, our district cabinet, we are privileged to host a winter breakfast for those that faculty members that work at the DEAO, and students come in and they sing songs and play, and it's just a wonderful day. And the last photo is at Belmont Hills, and I wanted to highlight this. The music teacher, they were playing, it was for the winter last day of school songs, and Ian Rose, who's a new assistant principal there, he got on a piano and he played for the students and the faculty, which was just a wonderful treat. So I just wanted to highlight some wonderful things that are going on in our schools that as a community you may not have an opportunity to see. Next, please. And Ms. Buckman does a fabulous job of organizing our day of service. This year it was held at Harriton with a lot of community groups. And it was amazing to see our elementary students and their families coming in to complete some of the activities at our MLK, Dr. Martin Luther King Day of Service, which was another point of pride in the district. And
Ms.
so,
James Coles, if I could jump in, I think
yes,
that was what my example of beloved community, because my favorite part of that day was seeing the high school students that were running activities, guiding the little ones through the activities, and the kids really get to look up to the older students. And, you know, unless they have an older sibling at home, they may not have that interaction. But the high school kids were so amazing with the elementary kids on all these different projects. And it, like, if you don't look at it and have your heart warmed, it's on you because it was wonderful.
And the high school students didn't want to leave, because at a table that I was sitting at, the students were making friendship bracelets. And the high school student who was in charge, she said, well, as they're cleaning up, can they finish their bracelets? It was over, but they wanted to stay and be a part of it. And the collections to the points of our food banks and some of the things for our families who may be experiencing some economic being economically distressed or having those things, we all get a turn. The collections of the things for those who are in need was just overwhelming. I mean, they were coming out with loads and loads of things that this community came together to support. So that was truly remarkable. So I thank you for listening to me for the first half on some of the things that are going on, and just keeping us with that mindset that we are one community. And if we continue to work together and have conversations with each other, let's come to the table and talk about things and just listen to one another, I think we'll continue to be this great community that we are right now. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Yanni.
Thank you very much, Shawana. What I want to talk about a little bit tonight is some messages around making our DEIB work really clear and overt. You know, when we hear the words diversity, equity, and inclusion, those words many times can be used, and they're being weaponized on the political stage, and how DEI efforts manifest perhaps in corporate America or at colleges and universities is really different than how it manifests itself in the K-12 environment, and specifically here in Lower Merion. And so since my arrival in August, we've really been focused on the B, this idea of belonging. It is really important to me that kids feel that they belong in school, and beyond feeling like they belong, like they really matter. It's important for me that staff feels that same way. You know, as part of a marginalized group myself, I know what it was like to go to school where I didn't always feel like I belonged, and I didn't always feel like I mattered. And so we're going to continue to take steps, and I'll talk about some of those specific steps in just a few seconds, but we're going to be taking some specific steps to help kids and staff really see that, you know, everybody in an organization, in a district, is important, but our kids and our teachers and our staff are the most important people in the organization, in our district. And so we really want to make sure that they not only know that we want them to belong and feel like they matter, but that they actually feel it themselves. So when we think about DEIB, this question has been asked a lot of me over the last couple of months. And sometimes I hear that we have a DEIB program, or that we're doing DEIB things. At the core, what it is, we want our kids to see themselves reflected in our curriculum. We want our kids to see themselves reflected in our staff. And we want, beyond just racial and ethnic diversity, we also want diversity of thought, right? We want people in our district that are going to come to work every day and do the best work that they can on behalf of kids, right? How do we diversify our staff? It's a challenge that every district is facing, and we have to go beyond southeastern Pennsylvania many times to get more diverse and deeper pools of candidates. So in the past, I shared with some folks that we actually personalized letters to deans of education of colleges and actually wrote to them specifically and said, please share our information with your best students and have them apply for the positions that we have available in our school district, and then have them email us so that we know that they've applied. Going to job fairs, going to recruiting events, all of those things are starting to become the recruitment strategies of yesteryear, right? In the world we're in right now, we need to be branching out. And so as a leadership team, we'll be doing that, especially as we ramp up planning for next school year. The E and DEIB equity, we want to make sure that we are giving kids every chance to be successful. And that might look different for different groups of kids, right? We want to look at what barriers exist. At the State of the District last week, I talked about sometimes math classes become a barrier for kids because not sometimes, often we see a disproportionate percentage of our Black and brown kids rostered into low-level math classes. So we have to identify where those opportunity gaps are. Otherwise, we can never close our achievement gaps. When we think about inclusion, an inclusive environment, that means being inclusive of everyone. And many times when we hear the word inclusion, we think about special education, but at its most primal level, inclusive means everybody, right? So whatever you believe in, whoever you love, whatever you look like, whatever your country of origin, whatever your religion is, whatever you bring to Lower Merion, we want you to feel like you belong here. And that's part of our work and inclusion. So I mentioned at the State of the District last week that our students in grades 5 through 12 completed or responded to a belonging survey. We're now taking that data and actually going to be meeting with groups of kids to dig deeper into some of those results. So there's the quantitative data. Kids responded to questions with, do you strongly agree with something? Do you agree with something? Do you not agree? Do you strongly disagree? And then there were some open-ended responses. And so over the next couple of weeks, the principals and I, Shawana and I, we're going to be meeting with groups of kids to actually say, here's the data that we got from the belonging survey. Help us operationalize this. What is it that you want to see in your schools and your school experience to make you feel better about coming to school, right? I mentioned at the State of the District, somewhere between 80 and 90% of students said that they agree or strongly agree that there's a strong sense of belonging in school. And that's great. But we still have a percentage of kids that don't feel that way. And so we have to then look at, well, what's causing kids to feel that they don't belong, right? Is it that they're of a religion that's looked down upon? Is it that they're in a racial or ethnic group that's looked down upon? Is it that they have a disability that people don't understand? So we really want to make sure that we target not only or not only look at that data that is the positive data, but look on the other side of that data to see what's keeping us from higher levels of belonging. I've been sending out updates from the district with some frequency. Those will keep up. They may not continue to be weekly, but in the coming weeks, those updates will include the belonging survey data. And then, it's fine to do a belonging survey and then put some things in place. But then what we need to do is continue to survey, continue to do, checkpoints with kids and with staff, because we have to see if the things that we're putting in place are actually working or not, right? So if kids give us ideas and kids talk to us about something they want to see, and we don't put anything into place, or we put something into place and their sense of belonging doesn't improve, then we have to go back and say, where's the mismatch, right? So one of the things that I think you'll see as we go through this spring, we'll have at least one more touch point with a check-in belonging survey, a little bit more brief than the one that the kids just took, but we need to continue to have data that we can look at internally and externally to see if what we're doing actually works. If you can go to the next slide, Dr. McCoy.
Before you go to the next
Yes.
slide, there was a parent, a community parent that had her hand. I couldn't see. Kira Jackson, that their hand up.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm a student at
Oh,
Harris.
student. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I couldn't see.
Yeah, no, sorry. So there aren't a lot of students at these meetings. I totally get it. I was just going to mention that as a Black student at Harriton, I find there is a very low amount of Black students in pretty much almost every like hard course. Like in my AP bio class last year, I was the only Black person, and that's the same thing for pretty much all of my other honors and AP classes. So even though I'm a senior now, I would love for Black students like in the future to see more of themselves represented, especially in harder like STEM courses. I feel like that's where there's a very small amount, and it's upsetting, you know.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the data pieces that we're looking at, or that we will be looking at this year as students are making their course selections, are where do we have overrepresentation of students and underrepresentation of students. So if we see through the course selection process that we have underrepresentation of our Black and Brown students in honors and AP and IB courses, we have to ask ourselves, why is that, right? Is it that kids are not selecting those courses? Is it that they've been, counseled away from those courses? What is it? Because it's at that point that we can change the trajectory of kids, right? Kids will be able to achieve whatever we expect of them when we have high expectations and we give all kids the time and the support that they need to be successful, right? We should not have an overrepresentation of minority students in special education, and we shouldn't have an underrepresentation of minority students in honors and AP and IB programs. And so one of the commitments that I'll make as superintendent is that I'm going to watch that data very closely, and I'm going to work with the administrative team and also our professional and support staff to make sure that in the moment, in real time, that we're changing the trajectory of that, because we have to interrogate that data, right? We have to figure out why we're seeing that, right? The other thing, when we think about that specific issue, underrepresentation, last week at the inaugural State of the District, I talked about taking care meetings back to their original purpose, where we're actually talking about in real time, what are the issues that we need to, that are rising to the surface or that are lying below the surface. What are we doing in terms of actionable steps to work towards rectifying those issues, and how are we charting progress, right? Sometimes you'll hear people talk about problems that exist, and we talk about admiring problems. In education, we can't admire problems. We actually have to attack the problems. And I don't believe that there's any situation in Lower Merion, or in fact any district, that we can't rectify when we all set our sights on doing what's best for every single student. So Kira, you said your name was Kira, right? Did I get that right? I'm looking at the people on the screen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. And if you wouldn't mind, if you would send me an email, I'd love to come and talk to you at some point. Well,
Definitely.
thank you so much. One of the things, thank you, Dr. McGuane. One of the things that I also feel really strongly about is that as I'm meeting people at Ask the Superintendent sessions, as I'm meeting people at board meetings, as I'm meeting people out in buildings, as I'm meeting people out in the community, I'm listening to what information people are asking for the most. And we've launched this page that is continuing to grow on our district website called Making Practices Public. And right now there are, let me see, do the math. There are 11 focus areas on making practices public. So much of this, there are a lot of good things happening in Lower Merion. We have to not only celebrate the good things, but we need to talk about how we're working through some of our issues, right? And so there, for example, you see there's a document up there, Pathways for Effective Communication. When families have a question or a concern, how do we know that they know who to contact? And so that resource serves the purpose of saying to parents, guardians, and community members, here's your concern, here's someone you can talk to that's best positioned to answer your question. We have our definitions of understanding racism and discrimination up there. Those are things that that are in policy, but we want to make sure that it's on the website so that people know what it is that we're focusing on. You see, there's definition of anti-Semitism. We've talked a lot about anti-Semitism over the last couple of weeks, especially in the wake of the Marionite article, right? So we want to make sure that the most important and the most essential things that we're working on throughout this year get put on Making Practices Public, because we want everyone to be able to have access to the things we're doing. While I was talking, I think I saw a comment come up on the, did I see a comment come up on the screen?
Yeah, I believe we had a question about if we have the demographics and do we have the demographics and can we share them? I believe it was about our assessments. Well, we have some demographics. So we do have, I was going to answer that in the chat, but then I didn't. We did a presentation in the fall at the CCOB meeting that did a data presentation that disaggregated by demographics. So that is available in our meeting agendas. And then there's also one that was done at our school board meeting that had demographic information with results in it. So those two things are available. And then I believe there's Roxana writes that she believes it's important to read Jim Crow's Pink Slip by Leslie Fenwick. Yeah, so that was that.
Ali couldn't see the bottom of the slide.
I can't move the slides. It's the slide shows. So there might be, it might be your computer or your, if you're using your phone, Ali, I don't know which one, but I can't move them up.
I also just saw a comment come through. Can we share the link to the data? So what we can do is we can actually have our data presentations that we've done this year actually put up on this page. We can work with folks in Ms. Buckman's office tomorrow to make sure that gets up there. That's a great idea. That's a great suggestion. And then the information is up there for everyone to see. All right. Dr. McGuane, if you can go to the next. So in the wake of the Marionite article that was published, what really came to light was a pretty significant misunderstanding or gap knowledge of what anti-Semitism is. And so we did some training already with our administrative team, and we're starting now to do training with our staff, and then we're going to have learning opportunities for our students focusing on what anti-Semitism is. And as a district, we've embraced the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism. It's also been adopted by the United States Department of State and 47 other countries and states across the world. And so what we want to do very clearly is to make sure when there is gap knowledge in our district, whether the gap knowledge is among the adults or among students or among the community, that we provide education around that so that we can make sure that everyone is well informed of whatever the topic is. And so in this case, anti-Semitism, like what is it and how does it manifest itself? And how, I think we all know what it looks like when it manifests itself in really overt ways, but we don't always know how it manifests itself in some nuanced ways. And so this definition is actually up on Making Practices Public as well, and it's serving as a seminal document as we do some work around anti-Semitism, not just in this moment, but moving forward as well. If you can go to the next slide.
Dr. Yanni, Roxana
Yes.
Wright's hand is up. Roxana?
Thank you very much. And I appreciate all the work that you are doing. I did put up the book, Jim Crow's Pink Slip, and it helps to have a better understanding of what happened to Black principals and Black teachers. So as to why the situations are the way they are. It also talks about the attitudes of students after desegregation. So then you begin to understand also the reactions that you're getting or not getting from your students who are of color. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that there has to be more of a unification of teachers and students so that they feel as though, you say belonging. If there is not the diversity, if there is not the equity, there is no way we're talking about belonging. If it's not all those things, that has to happen first before you can get to belonging. And so I think when you're being critical, and I mean critical to the point like you're talking about, Dr. Yanni, about to the point where we're saying, let's look at everything. We've done a great job, but we can do so much more. Let's look at the things that have not happened or things that have consistently come up over and over and over again, so that then we can begin to have a better understanding. This book is extremely, as far as I'm concerned, something that teachers, faculty, people should read this Jim Crow's Pink Slip. It really informs you a great deal of a lot of things, and even as far as statistics and everything else that is necessary, you begin to understand better why things are the way they are and what things you can really do to help. It's good that each community, as far as I'm concerned, is doing great within their communities, but understanding those communities and having people from those communities come together. Otherwise, you have young students who are Black students who feel inferior in many ways because there is not that many of the teachers who are Black that they can say, okay, this is how I've learned respect. And the way that Shawana was saying, in her community of Philadelphia, there was a respect because what you see within that culture, when you take them out of that culture and then you have other people in front, it's difficult. And so what do you get? You get other children who are not Black feeling superior because of this. Those things have to be worked out, as well as those in special education. It has to be worked out. So those are the things that I was thinking that are very important to look at, particularly that book. I've learned an awful lot from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxana. I appreciate that. Dr. McGloin, if you could go to the next slide, please. So as we think about, and we'll talk about this first in terms of anti-Semitism, and then I'll take it outside of anti-Semitism for just a moment. But one of the things that is we've taken a period of time to really reflect on our curriculum, right, around anti-Semitism and understanding of the Jewish culture and Jewish history. It's glaring in not just in Pennsylvania public schools, but in many states across the country, how little Middle Eastern history is taught. And so a few weeks ago, every once in a while I go down these rabbit holes of research, and I talked with college professors that are working with pre-service teachers. And it's not surprising that Middle Eastern history is not strong in our schools because our teacher preparatory programs don't focus on it. And so one of the things that Dr. McGloin and her team have been doing has been auditing our curriculum and working to see how we can absolutely start to bolster that area of the curriculum. So Dr. McGloin, can you touch a little bit on what you're doing now and what you're doing moving forward?
Sure. I'm going to say Dr. Lauren Hopkins. She got her doctorate today. So even though she's not here, I'm still going to give her a shout out because it's been so much work. But she and I met. She is our supervisor of secondary humanities. We met with our 10th and 11th grade social studies teachers recently to talk about where both Middle Eastern history and also Jewish history and the Holocaust reside in the curriculum. It is in 10th and 11th grade, and had a really long discussion about how in depth do we go? What are we looking at when we're having these discussions in the classroom? To Dr. Yanni's point, Middle East history is an area that we need to spend some more time on and shore up. And so this summer we'll be having conversations with the department about what does that look like? How do we make sure that we're actually doing justice to that area? In addition to that, we really want to have some more conversations about moving Holocaust education into the middle level. It's only at the high school level at this point. That takes a different rewrite. So we've also looked at our sequencing actually K to 12 from social studies, the social studies lens, to look at what's being taught. And really, short of 1 year, we really only teach world history when we get to the high school. And so we have to look at it differently and through a different lens from a sequencing perspective. The other thing that we're doing as well is looking at our English curriculum, and when novels are taught and then matching it up and moving some novels so that it marries with when we're teaching different topics in social studies, such as like night is a good example of that. Right now it's being taught in 9th grade. And so our English teachers are spending time on the history of it. It makes sense to move it to 10th grade. And so we're having those discussions about how do we align what we're teaching at the right time to align to what's happening in social studies. Kite Runner is another good example of something that we're teaching in 9th grade, which does align with what's happening in 9th grade. And so we're looking at it from multiple lenses, not just social studies, but also then how do our humanities marry up so that what we're reading in our English classes marry up to what's happening in social studies. So obviously a huge lens that we're looking through from that K to 12 sequencing, vertical articulation is important, and looking at the sequencing of our offerings to be able to move some things around as well.
And one of the things that I think is really important to remember when we, and I'm glad that Dr. McGloin brought up, literature. The one distinction that I want to make is sometimes when kids read a book, they're learning about history or they're learning about something, but we can't just rely on something, the reading of a novel, absent of, history instruction, right? So those two things have to be paired really, really closely together. And so I'm appreciative of that work. The same thing when we think about African-American history, right? So when we think about African-American history, we can't just focus on slavery, right? Because if we do that, we're not doing justice to the depth and breadth of African-American history. And we can't say, we're going to read, the Ruby Bridges book to 3rd graders and that, checks off a box, right? Around Black history. So as we're taking a look at how our curriculum represents all of the populations in Lower Merion. This is where Shawana is particularly helpful, because Shawana in many ways is there's something in education called critical friends group, and Shawana does a good job of asking very pointed questions to make sure that our curriculum teams, to make sure that the superintendent, to make sure that everyone is focusing on this idea that we can't leave kids out, right? All kids need to see themselves reflected in the curriculum. So, sometimes people ask, how does, for example, how does a role like Shawana's dovetail with curriculum, or dovetail with policy, or dovetail with finance, right? I think it was Roxana that said, if equity isn't a pillar of everything we do, we can't get to deeper levels of belonging. And I absolutely agree with that. And I think we have to look at equity in many ways. It's not just instructional equity and equity in terms of high level courses, but deploying resources across the district, making sure that our policies are reflective of what we believe in. So, Shawana's role definitely assists with that. I think I saw a comment come up or a question come up on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, I could go to it. It's not about this topic, so maybe we hit it at the end if you
Okay.
want. It was more about, okay, why don't we do that? Okay.
Yeah,
Want me to go to
great.
the next slide?
Yes. And now I think I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Buckman and Ms. James Coles.
Yep, so this is my slide. Just to make everyone aware of upcoming events. As we know, Black History Month starts tomorrow. Our schools have a variety of celebrations, and we'll have a treatment on our website where you'll be able to see what the schools are planning. And then as those different events happen and we get pictures, we'll build that site out. The theme this year is Black Americans in the Arts. And so each week we'll be looking at a different area of the arts that Black Americans have contributed to as well. So something to look forward to on the website in the coming month. In March 7th and 8th, as James Coles and I are going to be presenting again on our Building Belonging work at Pennsboro, which is the Pennsylvania School Public Relations Association Annual Symposium in State College. In April, we have our reading night, which is an event that we have each year sponsored by GSIB, which is the Gender, Sexuality, Inclusivity, and Belonging Group, and GAIN, which is a parents organization devoted to our LGBTQ plus students. And reading night, we have our high school students from our AGSAs, which are the All Gender Sexuality Alliances, come in and they read books that are targeted toward younger students, elementary level books that feature LGBTQ plus characters. And there's other activities. We usually have like arts and crafts, and it's a great night for, again, building that community across different schools for students and their families that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And then in May, we don't have an exact date yet, but our ELD, our English language learners, and their families are going to be invited to our annual family night. And that again is a way to build community across schools. So that families that come from different countries and speak different languages, we have a resource fair as part of that. Representatives from the county and township and various organizations, social service organizations are all there with resources. Last year we did an ice cream social. I think the theme that the ELD team is working on this year is a family game night. And again, it's a great night of community building. And the families are very appreciative of getting to know one another on that night.
All right. I see two questions in the chat. What were the identities of students who answered positively that they feel they belong in LMSD? For example, did a majority of students of all gender identities, all ethnic identities, all religious identities feel that they belong, or did only members of particular groups answer. I don't have that exact data. I will tell you overall it was positive among or across racial and ethnic groups. One of the reasons why we're going to actually put the data out there is because we want to make sure that people see the data, right? Because unless people see the data, people don't always believe the data. How do I know that? Because that's how I am. I need to see the data to believe it. And that's why we're going to make sure that that we put it out alongside of what we're going to do to course correct some of those areas that, some of the areas that we know need to be course correct. And then May 5th and 6th, can we do something for Holocaust Remembrance Day? Absolutely. There'll be some information coming out from the district on that for sure. Can the recording of this meeting be accessible once the meeting ends? Yeah, so our technology department usually, what is it, a day or two before they get the meetings up online?
Yeah, it'll be up hopefully by Friday. We have to process the video and add the closed captioning to ensure it's accessible. And then the committee meetings are up on the website under the View Meetings tab for 1 month or until the next of the committee meetings for that committee.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And my wasn't about putting it up there. It was that I didn't have that answer. I didn't know how long it takes to get up, and I should know that answer. So thank you, Ms. Buckman. Appreciate that.
Well, we thank you for joining us, and I'm going to turn it back over to our chairperson, Ms. Abby, and Ms. Carrie. Oh, Carrie, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms.
I just have I'm sorry, Abby, you can close that. I just have one real quick question about the belonging survey. What is the percentage of kids? Do you know the percentage of kids that took it? Like, is it a significant sampling of the students?
It is a significant sampling. We had what I would call a tremendous number of opt-outs that were opt-outs, family opt-outs of the survey. And then we also had a pretty significant number of students opt themselves out at the high school level. However, we ran the survey through Hanover. So it's not necessarily their survey. They're just doing the analytics for us so that we can focus on other things. We're comfortable though with the sample size. The reason that I want to do some more check-ins as we go through the spring is so that we can keep a pulse on it though. And when we put the survey data out, what we'll actually do is we'll put the questions right there so it's fully transparent.
Sorry, Abby.
No, that's okay. Thank you. That was a good question. I appreciate everybody being in to share in this meeting, and I wanted to mention one last thing, just in light of the fact that we're on the cusp of Black History Month, and how important it is to consider that every group, every identity kind of category in our great country that we live in, we all work together and we collaborate, and there's so many examples of collaboration that we should also sort of look to. And it just so happens that when we think of Black History Month, we often think of Martin Luther King Jr. for a very good reason. And I always think of the Brown versus Board of Education case that I learned about when I was in school, which desegregated schools. And it just so happens that the litigator on that case is my husband's great uncle. His name is Jack Greenberg, and he's a really important guy. And his identity, he's Jewish. He felt very strongly, was clearly very active in his role. We can stand up for one another while maintaining our own sort of traditional identities. And I think that's something to really also celebrate when that happens. So I just wanted to make a little plug for him and for the work. And thank you again for making the time to come to this tonight. The next meeting,
Thank you all so much.
Oh, I'm sorry. The next meeting, go ahead.
The next meeting, thank you, Ms. James Coles, is going to be on March 20th at 7 p.m. also on Zoom.